All right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome down to Security Rabbit Hole, episode 659 of the Down to Security Rabbit Hole podcast. We're taking a short break from the AI series that we're doing, which, by the way, you guys are really, thank you for all that response. It's been great between the texts and the messages and the big download numbers. Apparently we hit a nerve. So hopefully it's educational. Hopefully you guys are getting it. Go check out the videos; they're pretty good. Going all the way back to the one that we did with Gnostic AI, Sunil, where he's got some great audio visuals, and all the way through with John Dixon and Raja and Collins that joined us, and Eric. And so this has been it's a great series. However, every once in a while, is these two over here now, I have to take a break because my cup of influencer stupid runneth over. And this is going to be one of those episodes, like, you may not learn a whole lot, but you're going to get to hear us all vent. And I think you might want to vent along. So just feel free, join us, find a cup of coffee, maybe pour yourself a tall glass of bourbon in it. And you might enjoy this episode, because there's two things that I saw recently that absolutely drive me crazy. All right. Number one, the first one is there was a post that somebody put up, and no sense in naming and shaming or whatever. It is what it is, but it's, the idea was, it's like, hey, you just got breached. How are you going to take the data, your entire network down as fast as possible? And my head broke, because, guys, it is June of 2025, right? This isn't 1997. Like, the object isn't to take everything down, right? Am I crazy?
I think you're right.
I was gonna respond with, I don't know, RPG, grenade.
Somebody sent me a message.
Remember too, the image had on there, like, you can't unplug, you can't.
That's right.
Destroy. There was a whole bunch of stuff you couldn't do to take.
Somebody read that and sent me a PM and said, "Hey, Lon, it's a very simple red button." And I was like, "Oh, that's cold." It's like, but that only takes care of the human element. I was like, I should not repost that, but I know who you are.
I love the idea, though. Like, you're in the data center, you've just been hit by ransomware or something. Like, I got to stop this problem. Let me sledgehammer all my servers. And you know what? We don't even care about the encryption key anymore. Everything's dead. We killed it all. Right.
Nuke it from orbit. So I don't. So this episode, I wanted to make it about just some of the things that, like, because there's people that are bona fide, make themselves influencers out there. That's the top 100 this, and cyber influencer that, and on this list and on that list, and they've got a long list of things that they put behind their names about how why you should listen to them. When they tell you to shut your data center down and all your network down because you've been breached or had a ransomware attack, don't listen. That's not the route to go. Right? I mean, in modern architecture, I get it. There's some old networks that you have. Maybe if you're still on some old Cabletron hubs and you can't stop the spread and you don't know how to contain and all that, fine. You don't have any endpoint tools. You have no network security segmentation, any of that. Nothing of that exists. It's just you in a NetRanger firewall, or IDS rather, and a Cisco Pix firewall at the perimeter. Go to it. Set it on fire. Watch it burn. Laugh and just enjoy. Maybe you have a marshmallow or two, but really, in a modern network, you're going to shut it all down?
Maybe that was the purpose of the question, because it was, what do you do? Maybe it was seeing how many people are still on antiquated ideas.
I'm pretty sure that post was selling something, James.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I feel like a lot of this stuff, what posts aren't. I mean, these are the things that the few times I get on LinkedIn, usually at like 6 o'clock in the morning, I then start rage texting somebody else. And I'm like, I cannot believe this is sitting here.
For those of you guys that are wondering, we have a group text going, and it's usually about 6 or 7 in the morning that James starts. I know. Like, oh,
it starts my whole day.
Something he didn't like.
It starts my whole day. The other day, I mean, not to get off topic of this one, there was somebody posted about traveling through a small town, and they had, how in like light posts, they'll put like the little banners for different things. And the graduating class, they had the photo and name of the seniors graduating. And it was this whole post about how you know, the risks of that personal information being out there. And
Your response to that, James, was priceless. It was excellent. I loved it.
yes,
I don't
that
even go to
was brilliant.
LinkedIn anymore. I just got our stream, our James.
I know.
Right. Right. I don't come on. That is the Fonz jumping the shark. That is Batman with shark repellent spray. That is dumb. In a world where facial recognition is the standard. By the way, I went to get a new pair of glasses. If you think we're staying on topic, you're wrong. So I went to get a new pair of glasses, and my prescription expired, so I can go get a new prescription and all that. But because they don't fit under my hockey helmet very well, right? These are wide and like it squishes it's not comfortable. So I got a pair of like wraparounds, and they now make glasses. You can go look this up, Zenni.com. I was where I was shopping. They make a pair of infrared blocking sunglasses. The goal of which is to keep scanners from catching your eyes and being able to, like, so you can, if you go up to like one of those face recognition software tools, it will block out the scan from the part where your eyes are, and so it won't get a picture of you. Okay, that's cool. Now,
That's a real thing. That is a real thing.
seniors banners.
I know.
Really? Did you run out of ideas that day?
I mean, I just, it started funny. My response, right, was I grew up in a small town. Let's stop ruining small town traditions. I mean, it's
Right?
yeah,
Yeah,
but let's be like plausible about the issues that are going on. Honestly, my concern, like, I'm good with people sharing, like, put your thoughts out there and have discussions about them. We don't learn unless we put that stuff out there. My fear is that when we talk about the influencers, and Raph, we had that podcast, remember, where we talked about influencers.
We did. It was great.
We get to that point though where somebody's got a really high title, somebody that's not security or is news to security sees something that's posted like that, and all of a sudden they take that back and it's like, we can't do this anymore, without giving any more in-depth thought to it, or what is our risk in our situation. It's just, oh my gosh, we can't do that. And things start kind of disappearing when the reality risk of them is a lot lower than what we're really pushing. I mean, let's be fair, like name and photo, it's everywhere on LinkedIn, everywhere. Like you post it everywhere. Same thing. Like
that's episode 639, Famous with 12 People, Richard Berg.
Right.
Go listen to that one. Go watch that one. Richard's awesome. It's a great book if you haven't read it. And it's like exactly what we're talking about here, right? It's
pulling that context, right? Like we got to have the context around what is the situation that we're in versus the generic, name, whatever. I think that was the one I said. Security industry has done a good job of creating the fear around information that's not really that sensitive.
Right.
I mean, to be fair, last I checked, and it's been a few years, there were no data breach notification laws that required name and photo to be.
I tell you what, though, those big thick books that showed up on all our driveways once a year, that was a massive data breach because it showed everybody's name, phone number, and address.
Yeah, everything. Every year they dropped it off
to everybody.
I don't know.
Now it's a concern. And look, we've always used this example when we try to sell it, right? Is that there is a small portion of people that this is more of a concern for. Like if you're victim of domestic violence, or if you've got something that maybe you are trying to be a little bit more protected from it, but that's that's a small percentage, right? I mean, we're talking like the 99 to 1% ratio here.
By the way, schools do. I discovered this. Schools do have. When you sign up your kids to school, they have a thing that says my child is not allowed to be in photos, public photos. Like that is a thing, because there are plenty of people who are on the run from crazy significant others, and that happens, and unfortunately that's not a laughing matter, right? And I get that, but I don't know that
I think you see that more at the younger grades, right? I mean, the consent, because I know like at our school you have to consent. Now I was told that you don't have to, but I was like, I didn't realize that was an option. But being a private school, like you cannot consent, and then they can't put your kid in any photos. But the schools have Instagram sites, they're posting on Facebook, they're posting on all this stuff. And it's like, I don't want my kid in all these different things.
Yeah.
Now that's a little bit
animal.
different than seniors graduating from high school that let's go ahead and just call them adults.
Well, also, there's a big difference between throwing something up on the internet and putting on a sign on a street you have to drive down. It's 1,000,000% different, right? You know,
Town population 20.
who already know all of them anyway.
Right. We all, you guys all know each other. If this surprises anybody,
100%.
this is a shock.
Well, the thing about I'll just take a half step back, and I won't put just influencers in the bucket. I'll just say social media is the concern for me is one, propagating just bad stuff because it sounds good, and then the second and third order of adoption of that theory is like, I mean, I can tell you I've had conversations with people where, you know, I'm like, hey, I've done this like 1,000 times, and I said I would recommend doing it this way, and they go, no, I saw it this way done by this guy on YouTube. You know what I mean? So YouTube went from like, hey, this guy's doing or gal's doing something interesting. Let me draw from that to like, that's become the authoritative source in some case. And it's like that with even in social media. It's like, oh, well, this person tweeted that. So, you know, that's exactly what it is.
Hold on. I'm going to have to go look up this episode. So what episode was
Chat
Tom
amongst
on?
ourselves?
No. I had Tom Nichols on episode 400. For those of you guys who don't know Tom Nichols, awesome dude, former prof, Naval War College, like one of the most, June 24th of 2020, episode 400, Tom Nichols. He wrote a book called The Death of Expertise. And the reason I had him on that show is exactly what we're talking about now. Because like that guy was like, he actually spent time in Russia. He was an attaché. He learned the language. He learned the culture. He learned how they, you know, how they operate and all that. And so he would go give talks on Russia and spying and this stuff. And he would walk off the stage. He'd be like, no, I think you're wrong. Let me tell you what this thing I read on Reddit or something. He'd be like, are you serious right now?
It's crazy.
I think there's a difference though. You know, one, I just want to put out there, there's a lot of good information coming from influencers and coming from online. Like there's a lot of good, valid information.
100%.
But there's somewhat of a difference between, like I used YouTube to change my radiator in the truck. It was fantastic. Step-by-step walkthrough, right? A mechanical process to follow through. But when you switch that over to how should I do security or a more open to interpretation thought process, now you start getting into, it's a lot harder to see, is this the way I should do it or not? I mean, you could have the same with mechanical. Somebody could show you the wrong way to change a radiator and really jack up your car. But I mean, I think in general, a lot of those kind of how-tos are pretty straightforward. Like do this, do this, do this, versus kind of the thought exercise of, should I share this type of information? Because now it really, like the car is the car. My information is a whole different scenario of, you know what, maybe I'll share it in this situation, but I'm not going to go share it over there. But it's situation specific, and it's hard to give the best guidance in a, you know, single video or a single post on how to do that.
Well, it's super subjective in cybersecurity, right?
Yeah.
It's very subjective. And then full of opinions, right? So what happens is people say these proclamations like this plus this will always equal that. And that's always where I've always had a challenge, is where, you know, they just say with such confidence, like this will be your outcome. And I'm like, probably not actually.
I like to say generalizations are generally always bad. So I think what particularly where we back to go unwind and go back to where I started originally. I think the reason this one on this like shut down the data center thing chapped me a little bit more than the usuals, and I didn't just laugh it off and you know, like block the person like I normally would. There were a lot of like seemingly intelligent people that had. You ever like look through a post and go, wow, that's dumb, and then look through the comments section and realize there are some people with really big titles at really big companies that make really big decisions that are like, yeah, this is great. Oh, I should do that. You're like, and immediately in the back of my mind, I'm going, oh my God, what is happening? So I looked through those, and some of them, I mean, some of them were funny, which is where I hoped it was going to go, but some of them weren't. And I wonder, and it's kind of to your point, Jim, about like people take this advice, and I want to say, look, I get it. When things go bad, we used to just shut it all down and slowly bring it back up. That is a legitimate response that we used to have. Now, in the last couple of years, everybody's talking about zero trust, and I get it, cute buzzword. Somewhere between buzzword and the next best thing is the reality of what it is. But we've got like segmentation, like that's going back into the early 90s. Like we should have done that, right? Some people do it. We have endpoint tools, we have network tools, we have all this stuff. And if you've got a breach, say you've got a ransomware in your environment, if you have absolutely no ability to segment, as I said before, okay, maybe the only option is to just turn everything off and slowly go back. But you should, modern architectures, when you've got cloud, you've got they call carpeted space where your employees sit, people work from home, some data center stuff. You should be able to, at some fundamental level, segment that off. And if you're talking about walking into a data center and going, oh my God, I think we got breach one, that implies to me that you have no visibility, that you don't actually know what's happening on your network, right? And I'm not saying you put firewalls at your perimeters. I'm talking about like looking inside your network, what the packets are doing, who's talking to where, what the conversations are like from an endpoint and from a network perspective. That's two parts of the security triad. Like, this isn't new. Anton's been talking about this for like 7,000 years. Sorry, Anton, I didn't know you were that old. Like Anton's been talking about it since he stuck it in the stone tablets while riding his pterodactyl, okay, to work. Like it's that old of a concept. And for people to sit there and go, yeah, we should, that's what I would do. I would shut it all down too. I was hoping somebody in there besides my snarky ass would go, there's a better way to do it. Or maybe we should consider not doing that because that's how CISOs get fired, right? I mean, that's literally like, oh gosh, I had a tractor accident and lost my finger. Well, there goes the arm. Like what? What are you doing? I don't know. I think keep ranting. I'm going to stop myself and let you guys say stuff because.
I think there is absolutely. We have to clarify, like you said, we have to legitimize that there was a time where you would do that, and the idea of segmentation and building that and building those capabilities is to minimize the exposure of your environment to having to shut it down or to having to shut access to the internet off or access other systems off. Right. So the fundamental thread is there. The problem is you're trying to apply it to a world that you have to design for that capability, right? So it's not like, how do you shut it off? It's like, here's a very sophisticated set of processes you have to follow in how you build your infrastructure to facilitate that, right? And you really should have some ability or at least understand what the implications are or what are the characteristics that contribute to making that decision. Because I can even remember back in the old days when it was, 20 people in a remote office, like, oof, man, do I really want to unplug the internet? Am I going to how much trouble am I going to get into? And it's like 20 people email, and so there's just, everybody wants to overly simplify and kind of answer the question when in fact, a little bit where James, you were saying earlier is it's going to be more complex than that 100%. And sometimes shutting it off is the worst thing you can do. Right.
I think that's where it gets really interesting. The platform in which these questions come up. Right. Because in this case, right, it was basically a meme photo and just what would you do? And then which on one side creates a great opportunity to say, hey, let's have a discussion on this. Maybe there are a lot of people getting into security or have been in security that they wouldn't know what to do. I mean, it almost sounds like an interview question. I want to see your thought process, but maybe you don't know what to do. And you know what? This is the conversation starter. But then it's really just comments, and we know from social media, 45%, probably I'm just making that number up because all statistics are made up, are just people trying to rile other people up. Let me just throw some garbage in here. Like and you're doing it all through comments. So you don't really get a clean discussion and a platform to be able to say, hey, this is a great topic to bring up. How do we turn that into a community discussion? Let's get some different ideas and start getting valid stuff. Instead, you get, a whole bunch of people that just like, great question or thumbs up or, nothing answers with zero value besides agreeing with whatever the person said, right? And that's not just like, I don't know if this post had those, but so many posts
Yes, it
when people
did.
post something,
Almost
it is
certainly
just,
did.
that's amazing. That's amazing. Great. But it's a great platform to start that conversation where we're saying, hey, let's dig into this. Why should we not be doing that these days? What's a better alternative? What are some of the key things that might pull you this way versus that way based on, these factors? But how do you do that with your, I don't know what we're limited to now. What, you get like 1,000 characters in a comment? How do you do that in a comment that then gets lost in a sea of other comments? And now as the reader, if I'm actually curious about how I should do this, now I have to sift through a Reddit post basically that, some of them may be legit, other ones aren't, and maybe I can't discern the difference. Like, it becomes a very difficult thing to do, because I think in my mind, the idea of what they're trying to do, trying to be the cup half full here, is that we're trying to have a discussion and solve this problem. The reality is probably they're just trying to get posts so they can, market their company, whichever, right? But how do we turn that into a platform where we could have those discussions, share those different ideas, and then kind of raise up the ones that make more sense, right? Of how to better make that decision.
Yeah. Well, Jim, you mentioned, so that's a good point to put on it. But and so the other post that really caught my attention and why we're talking about this, and my buddy Graham has been on the show a couple of times, who probably listens to the show, so I'm gonna call him on it. But I saw, because you said your friends commented on this. I was like, oh, what did Grant say? So I read his reply, and I went back and went, I read the original post, and apparently I didn't know, I didn't realize that like accepted truths had become back up for debate. But there are actually people out there that will tell you that security is complexity is not the enemy of security. That something that is more complex is not less secure. I didn't realize that up was down and down was up, and Christmas was 4th of July anymore. But I kind of lost my mind for a minute, because I used the example of like, because we James is changing radiators, Jim's building cars, and I know something about a little bit about cars. I know how to make them go fast. So I use the car analogy, and I said, well, a 95 Chevy big block versus a 2025 Chevy engine right now, like complexity difference. Which one's more likely to break down? Which one's more likely to get accidentally repaired wrong or something done wrong to it? Or which one's more likely to break? And I stand by that analogy. Now, I'm not saying, again, going back to modern architectures, right? The world isn't complex, because you've got Amazon, Google, Microsoft, 17 other clouds and other places. You've got data centers. You've got work from home folks. You've got Macs, Windows, Linuxes, probably somewhere. You've got some antiquated operating systems. You've got modern things. Like, the world is complex and completely non-homogeneous. That said, if you're going to tell me that a system that has 7,000 APIs is no more or less secure than one that has 2, I'm going to find that hard to believe.
Yeah, you're crazy. Because like we were saying this earlier, is ability to secure something is directly inverse proportional to the amount of complexity. It is a one-to-one law physics. It's like thermodynamics. You're not gonna, you can't change it, and that's why back then they would say, hey, you can make, you can 100%, and you'd say, oh, I can make that system perfectly secure, but you would never be able to use it. It would be buried in a concrete cavern a mile on the ground kind of thing. And we jokingly said that back then, but there is a fundamental to it, is that the more people who use it, the more it's used for, makes it more difficult to secure, and to the point where you do reach this usability ratio. And it is the complexity ratio. It is the ultimate ratio of, hey, if you want to use it, and the more complex it gets, it's going to be really, really difficult to secure.
I think the correct statement would have been more of complexity is the gateway to opportunity. And the more complex I can get you to make your system, the more opportunity I have to create a solution to solve your complexity problem. Right. I mean,
love it.
you're brutal.
James
He
is
is
always the entrepreneur. I love it. You can tell which one of us is the got the head for this. That is so well said.
I mean,
think as a VC, somebody wants to give you money.
But I mean, you think about it. I mean, you're right. I mean, complexity, the more complex we make it, obviously, the more difficult it is to do it. I don't know about the 2 APIs versus 7,000, because to me, that's not necessarily complexity. Obviously, the back end's complexity, but from an exposure, 1 API, 1,000 APIs, I'm probably doing the same thing to every one of those as far as hopefully they're all sitting.
Okay, my
behind,
example sucks. Point taken.
Move on. But when you start saying, like, I think more from a complexity, I have Google Cloud, I have Amazon Cloud, I have this, then we're on the back end doing all these different things. It's exactly right. I mean, because I'm doing something different. The way I'm going to go secure GCP is different than how I'm going to go secure Azure and how I'm going to do AWS, right? Like I have to do something different. The APIs, right? Like I do the same exact SDLC for everything. It's the same, unless my APIs are across these different cloud fronts, right? But that you get that complexity because now my tooling changes, the output expectations change. We've got 6 different vendors. My complexity is spread across the way. Hence, what do we get? We get things like SOAR. We get opportunity to do this. What we're seeing this, Raph, when we've had a couple of these conversations with, what was I always forget the name of that company, but that's doing the identity security, right? And it's like, okay, the complexity has increased with identity because now we say, oh, well, we've got Okta, we've got SailPoint, we got BeyondTrust. I'm using 15 different identity providers, and it's like, you know what? Let's take security out of each one, and I'll do the security, and I will solve your.
That's the perfect example. Yeah. That's the perfect example. I had a conversation with somebody the other day on, if we were talking identity, and not even just sort of a weird segue into it, and he goes, "I miss the good old days of boring Active Directory," and I sort of went, "What?" Because I don't. He's like, but listen, he was like, "Hear me out. In AWS, configuring an identity can be nightmarish, like." Wes Craven level nightmarish, because you've got so many options, so many features, so many configuration things. Like AD wasn't that complex by comparison. That's a weird thing to say to somebody from somebody that's like lived through it, right? I have the PTSD, I have the scars where bad AD touched me, but it's but the level of complexity between the two isn't even comparable. And then you get things like, oh, I left an S3 bucket wide open. Whoops. I didn't even know that. I did that by accident. Right. And so I don't know. I think that's a good example. And we get to, as the world continues to ratchet up, and this AI series kind of illustrates that, we're adding more complexity to it with systems that I don't think most of us understand. Hence the AI discussion. And we're talking about it like it's no big deal. Like, we get it. Here's 7 steps to secure your AI. And I don't think it's that simple. I think we're just starting to that sun is just starting to rise over the fact that in a lot of our brains, like, holy cow, this isn't, while it's a generational or whatever the next big evolutionary word is for the difference between pre-AI to post-AI, right? The level of complexity is like Connor McDavid's hockey stick. I mean, it is the more abstraction we add, the more these non-deterministic systems we add on top of complex abstractions. I'm going to tell you, I don't fancy myself too dumb, but this stuff gets hard to try to follow all the way down. And it takes a lot of brain power and not one person, right? It takes a lot of people to try to understand it the scope of what it can do, and then figure out how do you put it in the box and mark off the edges. That's not easy.
I just got to jump in. You've absolutely hit the nail on the head. 100%. I got to say this, man. When you bring in those layers of abstraction, you begin to obfuscate, right? And I remember very early on when the iPhone first came out, and I was like, an app, and you just press a button, this magically happens. And I was like, oh my God, there's so much happening layer upon layer. We're increasing the number of layers in this layer cake, right? And it's no longer OSI model. It's like that times 100. And we're constantly layering and creating, right? And so now what happens is bad guys, threats, they know where those cracks in the layers are, right? So it's not only complex because there's so many layers, but we're also creating more and more abstraction from our knowledge of actually what's happening in those layers. So we talk about detecting attacks and things like that. We still speak in terms of, API or whatever the case may be. Okay, what does that look like in a world of AI, right? And not to bring the whole conversation to AI, but your point about abstraction, obfuscation, and layering cannot be said loud enough. That is an accelerator. It's a magnification of complexity. Therefore, if we agree that there's an inverse proportional relationship of complexity to security, what does that tell you, right? Things are going to get more and more difficult as they come along.
Well, we're expanding the, what we don't know, right? And it builds upon that. I think another good example, really kind of like your car example, Raf, is look at the complexity of something like Mac OS versus Windows, right? Mac said, we're only going to run on this hardware. And how much smoother is everything when you're talking about crashes? Like my Mac doesn't crash anything, right? But then you go to Windows and they say, you know what? If you can build it in your garage, we'll run it on, and we'll run on anything. And what happens? Windows has blue screens. Mac doesn't have a blue screen, right? Like they opened it up, the complexity to say, we'll try to work with everything. Great example. To me, like that's a great example of that. We keep it simple. We go complex. The other side of it is when I used to teach for SANS, the .NET course, I used to always brag on the Java course. I'd be like, listen, we have it so good. .NET, we've got web forms and MVC. That's it, right? I mean, everything was either built into .NET or you're using like a true, I bought third-party control, like a RAG control. Java's over there. They got Faces. They got Spring. They got all these different frameworks. And I'm like, how nice is it that we just have this? And then, of course, .NET came out with NuGet and screwed it all up. But when you think about that from a development standpoint, it used to be everything was packaged in your framework and you wrote everything else. Now look at the complexity of I'm using NuGet or I'm using something else. I'm pulling in all these packages from whoever in the open source world. So now, kind of like that API example versus the cloud example, now I've got all these different pieces that I'm relying on that I have to try to figure out how to keep updated. I mean, it's one thing to say I need to update .NET. It's another thing to say I've got 3,000 other packages in my app, and any one of those I could update and it would cause a problem with my system. And that complexity severely increases it because now it's so much harder to try to keep everything up to date versus just saying, I just need to update this one thing. And probably the same thing, right? We always say patch management is one of the foundations. It's the basics, right? But the reason why patch management sucks is because I've got a gazillion things on that server. So I can't just go update Windows to the next hotfix without thinking that one of those things is going to break.
Yep. And so here, this is my favorite. Hold on. And I was searching this. Do you guys remember this?
Yes. Yeah.
This perfectly illustrates what we're talking about. There are and if you're not watching the video, it's the XKCD cartoon called Dependency, where it says, all modern digital infrastructure. And it says, there's like one small peg at the bottom. It says a project some random person in Nebraska has been tirelessly maintaining since 2003. I would argue that goes back further and it's bigger. The top now is a bigger crown. And there's like less and less people that know how to bottom parts of it work. And I'm telling you this because I think it's true that sometime in the near future, something in the underpinning is going to break, or somebody's going to find an exploit in the way, like some of the basic OS, Unix OS level something is going to happen. And we're going to go, oh crap, nobody knows how to fix that. It's coming. It's coming because we're all becoming abstraction people. And the assumption is, well, all that stuff below, somebody else is maintaining. It's not relevant anymore. I can do it with AI. Wrong, and really.
Yeah. What's interesting too about that graphic is it's very clear, right? Like it's point, like this is the one thing. But I think to your point with the abstraction and all that stuff, that thing builds up pretty clear, like it's against a wall, right?
Yeah.
So everything's building out to one side. So obviously it's pinching on that one pin. But in reality, what we're doing is we're building out in both like all directions. So a clear picture of that, you could probably pull that one pin that looks like it's holding everything, but the top is balanced somehow, right? And it's actually some other thing that's like a 2-pound weight that you wouldn't even think of, that you pluck that one from the middle of the balance and it goes, right? Like you knock out that peg and you're like, it's still standing. And then all of a sudden somebody goes and just touches one thing, and it's not even, it doesn't look like a support. It's in the middle of it, but it changed the weight enough.
It's like
that the scale tipped.
It's like every game of Jenga I've played with my kids recently. I don't understand. They're pulling out pins, and I'm like, it's gonna fall, and I'm like, this one for sure isn't. Book over. Like, what the hell? How am I this bad at this game?
But you know what I mean? Like we don't know.
Absolutely.
We might look at it and say, no, that's the dangerous spot. And then we have no idea that really everything's hinting around this one little piece that doesn't look dangerous at all. It's kind of like when that years ago when the guy pulled the left function out of one of the repositories. Like there was this whole thing because he had an issue with the licensing or something. And it was the stupidest thing. Like all it was like a left function call. And he's like, you know what? The heck with this. I'm pulling it. And he pulled it, and like half the internet broke because everybody can't write their own left function, right? And so all of a sudden this library disappeared. And it was a huge news deal, right? And something so simple that you're saying nothing's hinging off of this. And then boom, it's gone. And you're like, oh shoot. I think that's the scary part, is the stuff we think are the problems are probably not the problems. Right? That's the obvious piece. It's this hidden thing that, you're going to accidentally flip that switch. Like, what's this switch do? And you pop it and you're like, what? I mean, I've got literally in my kitchen, there is a switch on the countertop that cuts the power to the dishwasher. So please, if we're dishwashers coming, don't push that switch. You know what I mean? Like you don't know what and when we moved in, we had no idea what the switch did. Like,
I just see James going flip.
Is this the garbage disposal? Like nothing's happening.
That's hilarious.
And we have one upstairs.
On, off.
There's one upstairs in our bedroom too. There's like a set of like 6 switches, and there's one that doesn't do anything. And we're like, I wonder what this does.
It turns off the neighbor's entire power switch. Do you guys remember? So total segue, and this is I'm going to end the show because I think we're now we're out of fun things to talk about. But do you guys remember that episode in Friends where they're flipping the switch and they're tearing the apartment apart, trying to figure out what that switch does? I feel like we're getting close to that point in our software and infrastructure development where somebody's going to go, I don't think this does anything, and they're going to remove it, and like half the internet's going to break. They're going to go, wait, how do we put it back?
That's it. Well, that's to your point, right? I mean, we're losing the people that know the underlying system to know, oh yeah, this actually controls this other piece. We can't have it in there. But we come along and we do a review and we're like, this doesn't look like it's being used. What is this for? Like, yank that thing out of there. And then they go,
That's
yank
why I
it.
don't do software development, because I would do that all the time and I'd be fired very fast.
Totally.
They would not want me on these projects. I'd be like, it doesn't look like it does anything. 86 it.
Because we were
Turns
so
out
good
it's a
at
big
commenting back in the day. There's a good comment of, this is the workaround I did for X. And somebody goes and botches it, and it's like, oh man, it's gone. They're like, dude, you have the copy of the code? No, I didn't save it.
Oops. All right. Well, this has been fun, and dare I say, a bit therapeutic. Thanks for indulging me, guys. If you've been listening along, I hope you've laughed, maybe cried a little, and maybe it's been a bit therapeutic for you too. I think it's good to do this every once in a while, because if not, we're all just going to go just crazy, and it's going to go bad. It's going to go bad very, very fast. Or we'll drink, and I don't want to do that either. So I mean, I do, but not like that. By the way, if you want, I think we do these kinds of episodes some semi-regularly. It's generally when somebody tags me in something on a post somewhere, and he's like, "Hey, you should check this out." So yeah, keep tagging me in ones. They're funny. Some of them are slightly rage-inducing, and make fun of anybody specific, Grant. But there's some good things out there. There's some good content, and there's some just really, really bad content. So I hope this is something good. Thanks, James. Jim, thanks for joining me, guys. Thanks for making this a part of your day. We'll be getting back to your regularly scheduled AI series in just a bit. And I'm not sure what we got in store for you next week, but we'll find out soon. I'll talk to you guys later. Guys, thanks. It's been a blast. We'll catch you another time, another place on another Down